Okay, so let's move on to part C down here. Hopefully you can see. Okay, so this one we're getting more complicated. All right, we're going to start out with book income of 85,000. I don't know why that always does that. All right. And we have to figure out, once again, that 10% of taxable income because we've got some charitable contributions here. We have municipal bond interest. Okay, so that's something different. Remember, that is includable as income on the financial statements, but it is not includable as taxable income. We have a charitable contribution of $4,800. We have dividends of $2,600 from a 10% owned domestic corporation. So remember that they're going to have the dividends received deduction. If they own 10% of it, that means they're going to get a 50% deduction. So 50% of those dividends, they're paying tax on $2,600, but they're going to turn around and get a deduction then of $1,300. So in effect, they're only going to pay tax on $1,300 of that. Ooh, the corporation also has a $6,800 charitable contribution carryover. All right, they're just making it more complicated for us here, aren't they? All right, so let's see here what we want to do. So we need to figure out how much of the charitable contribution that we can take. All right, so we're going to determine that first. Well, actually, what we could do, which way do we want to do this? Yeah, we want to do the charitable contribution. So this is before any dividend received deduction. Now, the thing about the dividend received deduction is that is not going to show up on the financial statements. So it would not have been included. That would not have been included anywhere in this 8,500. So when we're doing our adjustment here, so we're going to do 10% of taxable income. We actually don't have to make any adjustment for it because it's not included in the first place in that amount. So we're going to start with our 85,000. All right. So we are going to then subtract. Okay, so we got the municipal bond interest, which would be included in there. So now we're going to subtract 1,800 for the muni bond interest. That's our first subtraction. Then we are going to, hold on just a second here. Okay. Sorry, my dog was barking. You don't need to hear that. So now we're going to have to make an adjustment we got to add back the current year charitable contribution of $4,800. Now, we don't need to do anything with this carryover because it would not have been included in the book income. We're going to take that this year if we can, right? But this wouldn't have been included in the book income. So for purposes of this adjustment, we don't need to do anything. But we do need to add back then our charitable contribution. Oops. All right. And I think, yeah, so that's all we need to do at this point to find the amount that we're going to use to multiply by 10%. So we'll do the math on that. Okay. Minus 1,800 plus 4,800. So 88,000 times 10% is 8,800. So we can take $8,800 deduction for charity. All right. So on our So this is what we can take this year, this $8,800. But if you'll see, we have this $6,800 charitable contribution carryover. So we're not going to be able to use all of that because we're going to take the $4,800 from this year, right? And then after we've absorbed that, we will then apply the $6,800 carryover. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, remember up here we said we determine, so this is what we're allowed to take for tax. We're going to take the difference between that and what we took for book, which was $4,800, which means our difference, oops, I don't know what I'm doing there, is 4,000 is our adjustment for charity purposes. Okay, so now we've got that. It doesn't ask, there's no question really about how much the total charity for tax purposes. Well, we're going to take the $8,800, but there's no question about what the carryover, the remaining carryover would be for charity. But essentially, we're taking $8,800, right? And we've got $4,800 currently plus 6,800. So that's 10,000, 11,600. So the difference between that 11,600 and the 8,800 is what would be carried over. Now, there's no question about that on this problem, but that's just sort of an aside. So let's go over here then, and we're going to do the rest of the math. So we're going to take the $85,000 minus the $1,800 muni interest. All right, and we're going to then subtract the charitable contribution adjustment. This is actually going to be a negative here. And if you remember, this was a positive. This came to a negative, but then it means we add it back. This is a positive, which means we're going to subtract it. There. All right, and I think, yeah. Okay, so we're going to do that, and then we have the dividends received deduction. And this is kind of funny because they put this in here. In reality, if you look at the first page of the tax return, you'll see that the dividends received deduction isn't really included or isn't really subtracted from taxable income. It's not on the M1, but ultimately this is what our taxable income is going to be. So I know I say M1 over here, but the dividends received deduction actually doesn't show up on the M1. But what the question is asking for is what is the taxable income? So in that case, we do have to subtract it. So our dividends received deduction, we take it's $2,600 from a 10% owned domestic corporation. So 50%. So we're going to subtract $1,300 from that calculation. And I think this is it. Okay. Let's get the calculator out. We're going to start with 5,000 minus 1,800 minus 4,000 minus 1,300, and we get 77,900. Okay, so we've got our taxable income then here of 77,900. And again, that's after we include the dividends received deduction. It would not be on the M1, but it would be on the tax return and would be considered part of taxable income. So there is part C, and I'll continue with another video of part D.